Hell yeah. We're 21st today, 21st today.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I'm here with Jeanette. We're just going to let the figures go up, and let's just have some recognition. It usually takes a minute before people start tuning in. I used to right, here we go. So, hello everyone, it's the 21st of May. Hello Gary, I did get your letter this morning. Thank you so much, Gary. God bless. Hello Charlotte. And this is John Wedger, one of the Brewer reviews, but I've got the great honour of having Jeanette with me today. And Jeanette threw tea on me earlier, so I have to take my...
You dribbled.
Yeah. So I apologise for this little kid's t-shirt, because it is my boy's t-shirt. So, hello Kiernan. Michaela Bates, you are our 100th viewer. Hello Denise. The badges, we've got about 5 left, and I'm going to take them to the one of the demos and give them out. But we do have the beautiful stickers, which are, everything's of high quality. Hello Jono, everyone's of high quality. These are the ones Steve-O and D got for me. Hi Jay, hi Rich, and they're static, so you dip them in water. Hello Addy, Addy's all from the Pacific Northwest. So if we let the viewing figures go up, we can get as near to 200, and they should. Hello Lucy, Lucy Decoy, and there we go. Big shout out to Lacoria, Sandy, and the team in Scotland. Hey, there we go. And Darren says hello. Hopefully Darren is watching. And Jeanette is here. Sam Baldwin.
Oh, yeah.
Sam Baldwin, lovely. Go Sam. Got such a following out there, Sam. Such a following, and let's hope we can. And Dylan Efford. Dylan is one of our little gang. Dylan's ex-paratrooper who's always stand by. Eric the Vikings there. So hello Martin. The trainers are fantastic. And Martin bought me some trainers because he thought I looked scruffy in my...
He's buying a car.
Yeah. Oh no, don't start that one. And Mahani, thank you. 2 more, and we're ready. We're on the 200, and I will commence. There's a lot of anticipation. Right, Dylan and Nancy, you had 200 viewers. You're going to get a special hug when we see you for that, Nancy. Right. I'm here now with Jeanette. Jeanette has been in touch with me for a little while now, and Jeanette's tale is one of a survivor extraordinaire. Jeanette got in touch with me, and we spoke at length about a month ago. Jeanette has come from the Surrey area, and her story is one as a survivor of SRA. Now, it's a divided camp with the SRA, and here's my tea tonight. It's a divided camp. There's those that sort of don't believe it goes on. There's others that won't even go there with it. So it doesn't actually matter whether you believe it or not. Those that do it believe in it, and those poor souls that have to endure it have got no option but to believe in it and live through it. Jeanette is a difference, because Jeanette is a woman of absolute composure, and has sort of declined a bigger offer to speak out, a bigger platform. She's declined that to come to attend here tonight, and she was inspired by the interview of Darren. So this goes to show how powerful this platform is. Okay, and we're also having this filmed by a guy called James, and James is hopefully going to put together a more of a comprehensive documentary about all our work. So thank you so much, Jeanette. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you, John.
We're gonna do this like I usually do with recaps. Jeanette, we've discussed sort of like the protocol of this, so Jeanette might at some point need to jump out in and out, but let's go from there. So Jeanette, it's an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you so much for coming along, and I know this will go a long way and make a difference. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you sort of come to be here? And I know we're going to break this right down, but you are a survivor.
I am, yeah. I am a survivor of satanic ritual abuse. I was born into a family that was involved in satanic ritual abuse, so I was in it from birth, and probably intensely for 10 years, and then my abuse continued in a different form for maybe up to about 12, 13. So... yeah, I am a survivor.
If someone from the outside was to, or one of your neighbours was to look on and see Jeanette and her family, what would they see to the outside world?
Well, we lived in South West London, and we lived in a council property area, like a little council estate. So what they would see is what would have been typical of a family in the 60s, 70s and 80s that was from that area, living in that way. So no different, or no... wouldn't have stood out from any other families.
So there was nothing like, things daubed all over your house, and the neighbours think, oh, that lot, they're into some weird stuff.
No, we had normal neighbours. My mum is an absolute master of disguise. They all are, because they're trained to be that way. So no, we would have seen as the normal family, struggling to make ends meet. Kids were probably, there were 5 of us, so, probably a bit scruffy and, unkept.
And Jeanette has siblings, but we're not going to involve the siblings, albeit that they were victims themselves, but Jeanette's respected their views on whether they do or don't come forward. But Mum and Dad, what was Dad like?
Dad was an electrician, normal looking guy. I think he was about 5'8", black hair, blue eyes, normal looking guy. Used to go working on different building sites, wherever the sparky work was. In his normal daily life.
And Mum?
Mum was Mum, so in those days she was just home with the kids, yeah.
And so just from the outside, it was just a normal family doing normal things.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that we discussed was that you've got quite a good memory recall.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of survivors of this sort of abuse have got years, because of the trauma, totally blacked out. But what makes you different is the clarity of your recall. Now you sort of stated that this went on almost from birth.
Yeah, as far back as I can remember, I was being sexually abused within the satanic ritual, satanic ritual abuse cult setup,
Right.
as far back as my memory will take me, and that is quite far back, toddler, if not a little bit less, but a little bit younger. So yeah, my memory, I haven't always had the memories. I spent quite a few years blocking them out in every which way I could, in order to just not feel the pain and stay alive. So, but when I did decide to recover my memories and recover, then yeah, it's taken me quite some time, but I've been on this journey for probably around 25 years now, and my memory recall, as you call it, is very clear, and details are everywhere.
And you've done the most important things. You totally broke the cycle. It stopped with you, and that was that. It was not going to go on any further. Now, there's a lot of people that think that paedophiles are just men. What would your answer to that be?
Absolutely not. I mean, in satanic ritual abuse, the abusers are equal measure of men and women. So there's not even a difference really. It's not even dominated by males, and there's a few women. It's literally equal measure.
And in respect to cultures and classes and religions and races, were they as diverse, or was there a specific group that looked a specific way that were involved? Who were they? Who are the Satanists, as it were?
Who are the Satanists? I mean, the Satanists that I was abused by were normal families in southwest London that were united in this cult, as I call it. I don't think religion or creed or anything like that even comes into it. So.
Right. Now, we spoke earlier, and you were going about you've got memories from as young as 3 years old. What were they doing to you at the age of 3 years old?
So the abuse started in the home, with my father abusing me. So that's quite vivid memories of him just being very violent and aggressive towards me vaginally, and starting to, use his hands in ways of abuse, and being always very filled with rage and telling me that it's all my fault. I deserve this because I've been born female, and he has to do it, and so in the home that abuse started very early on.
So we're talking sexually abused by your father.
Yeah.
So where was your mother when all this was happening?
Right there, watching. Yeah.
And did at any point she intervene?
No, never. She actually would set it up for him to do it.
Can you explain?
She'd make sure there was a room vacant.
Right.
So if the other kids are out of the way, she would, for example, leave me in their bedroom. That was always a very common place. And my father would come in, and she'd make sure that there was no interference, no interruptions. So she would set it up. She would often, as well, within the home situation, she would call me to her and pretend to be really angry, like I'd done something wrong. It was like a little ritual of its own, really. And she would hit me and physically abuse me, and then she would send me to my father.
Right.
So, for example, he would have a bath run ready, and then the drowning ritual would begin from there.
Yeah, this is something that crops up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Suffocation and drowning.
Suffocation and drowning.
So your mum would engineer a problem in which you was the cause of the problem.
Yeah.
You would then be slapped around, shouted at. Your father would run a bath.
Yeah.
And then you said the bath ritual. What can we explain that more?
So I would
Describe
then
that
be
for us?
stripped down naked. My mum would often strip me naked and then send me into him, so I was naked once I arrived into the bathroom with him, and he would pick me up, put me in the bath, make me lay down, and then this practice of putting his hand over my face and just ducking me in and out of the water like this, so it makes you feel like you're drowning.
Right.
And then after so long doing that, he would hold me under, and then somehow he always knew the moment to bring me back up.
Right.
And then once the bath ritual was done, he would take me into his bedroom and sexually abuse me.
We've got to put this out to people. There are people out there that have children. And there's people out there who dismiss this goes on. Can you imagine doing this to a 3-year-old child? I mean, please try and. And Jeanette makes no excuses for being graphic here, and this is part of the reason for doing this interview. People need to wake up and understand this goes on. And this there was no telltale signs on the outside of this. There was absolutely no reason for anyone to sort of intervene or question in it. And this is just a total sort of mind control, this is above bullying,
Yeah, because I think the thing that my mum would do by, being aggressive and angry, it was all mind control, because it's feeding you the information that it's your fault.
Yeah.
So it's breaking you down right from the get-go. Right from the get-go, when my father was sexually abusing me, I may not have even been out of nappies.
Yeah.
But always it comes with that rage and that brainwashing of this is your fault.
Yeah.
So it just breaks you down. It breaks a child down to never be able to defend themselves.
Jeanette, 2 days ago, a good friend of mine committed suicide. A few years before that, a father committed suicide, and there was a lot of abuse going on in the home. And suicides are a huge problem. So is alcoholism, so is drug addiction, violence in the family, and total dysfunctionality. So much of this has got its root in abuse.
100%, yeah.
People need to understand. Now, we were discussing you as a child. So at some point, you've got to be released into society. You've got to attend school because that's going to make even more alarm bells. So how comes a teacher never picked up on this? How would you present yourself in school?
I've asked myself this so many times because I went through a stage of feeling really angry with society, teachers, doctors, whatever, that no one actually looked at me and went, what is wrong with that child,
So how would you present yourself as a child?
I would be now looking back as an intellectual adult that would see what other people would see. I would have presented as a seriously traumatised child, like terrified child. I would just cower in corners in playgrounds and classrooms, and I would have also been very underweight and malnourished. Never had appropriate winter clothes. I was always cold and very thin, and baths and hair washes and things like that weren't really a thing. Maybe once a week, or you share the bath water with your siblings.
I know that from when I was investigating it. There was one girl, and I said to her, what do you like at school? And she actually described yourself. Now I then, years later, maybe 20 years later, I went and tracked down her teacher.
Wow.
And I said, and he actually did. He said, I think there was something wrong, and he burst into tears. He said, I could have saved her. I said, well, I don't think you could have done, but she always remembered you as a nice guy. She said, if I was ever going to talk to you, it was going to be this guy. His name was Trevor. So Trevor, she said you was the only one but she was too frightened. So there are people out there that work in schools. There are people that engage with children. They must have kids like this present themselves all the time.
I think nowadays it would be flagged up far more than it did when I was at school. I'd like to think that, because when a child is so glaringly something so obviously wrong, we do have different things in place now, don't we, with child protection, but safeguarding and everything, but there was nothing like that.
And we're going to move the timeline on in a second, but what I want to say is that we get a lot of people here that criticise the police for stepping in and taking children into protective custody. They criticise the social services for stepping in and stealing children, as it's called. But so can we have a balance here and see that sometimes children are taken into care because their parents are like Jeanette's parents and they've been rumbled, right? So there is a need. 80% of all child abuse goes on within the home environment or those with parental responsibility for children. Let's not get this wrong. There was this thing about stranger danger that came out, and even Jimmy Savile wrote a book on stranger danger. Stranger danger is such a small percentage of the risk to children. Most of the risk is in the home, so let's get that right. So, from the age of 3 years old, there's something you said to me earlier that you started to be sold.
Yeah, so it was standard. When a child turned 3 within the family and the SRA cult, you were sold. So I was sold at the age of 3. That meant that then you would start to be taken out of the home and sold into paedophilia and used then for rituals in houses or lots of different venues. And that was when my parents would then start making their money from me.
Right, let's start off with rituals. You mentioned rituals. What does a ritual mean? What did you remember about a ritual?
Rituals, I'm going to generalise because obviously they can come in very varied shapes and sizes. But so, for example, I would be taken to a house, generally local within the sort of area, and it would be obviously all pre-arranged. There would be lots of people there, lots of men and women, all standing around drinking and chatting as if it was a social. And my father would start to go around and collect everyone's money. They would all be passing him the money.
Was you the only child there?
Quite often, yes. Or the other thing that could happen is there would be other children in different rooms, depending on the location. And also another regular thing is all the children would be gathered up in one room, like maybe 4 or 5 kids, and we'd all be lined up. And then you'd be picked out of the lineup for whoever wants you. But in the situations where it was just myself, then my dad would start collecting the money, and my mum would take me into what was the ritual room and strip me naked and leave me there. So then what would happen is all the people would come in, and the satanic abusers, they would form a huge big circle around me, and various things would happen. But again, for example, there would be a cup passed round that they would sip from.
Right. Do you remember what was in it?
Oh yeah, blood.
From
yeah.
where?
I don't know where they would have got that cup full of blood from at the time.
Okay.
But I know how they got blood, but in that moment I don't know where they'd have gone and filled that up.
We're going to cover that, aren't we?
So then they would there would always be someone that was leading the way. So there would always be a person dressed in like a robe set up.
Can you describe the colour or?
So the colours that I used to see a lot were red and white robes, and it did vary. It did vary, but I would say a prominent robe would be red and white. So he would, or she, whoever was wearing the robes, would be in charge, and then they would start to chant and sort of sway from side to side. Quite often now, all these people in the circle were naked as well, so they'd all stripped off. And then once the person in the robes sort of signalled, they would take it in turns to come to me and sexually abuse me in whatever manner they chose.
So this could be men or it could be women?
Yeah, men and women. And they would then, when they were finished, they would go back into the circle and the next person would come through, and it would go round in a sort of anti-clockwise order.
Was it always anti-clockwise, was it?
Yes, yeah. It was always anti-clockwise, yeah.
We'll recap on this because Jeanette, from the age of 3, she's been abused at home. sexually abused, and also violently abused, and there was drowning. So this is a torture, and this is a mind control element that does crop up quite a bit, and I've heard this quite a lot. From then, at the age of 3, they then deemed it ready that they could then start profiteering out of Jeanette, and she was taken to rituals, also taken to paedophile groups for the purpose of paedophilia, but also to satanic rituals. So when we see these Satanists speaking out, they attack me all the time they attack me. So look who's behind these people, okay? And look at the reigns list. Look at the names on the reigns list, the names that are in popular life and in politics that are on the reigns list, and this is what they do, okay? This is not pagan worship, this is not white witchcraft, the love of the birch tree or the oak or the apple or whatever it is. This is what they do, okay? Look at the reigns list. Jeanette, 3 years old, is taken there by her mother and her father. Now again, look at the betrayal of trust. And one of the things you tend to see is the parents taking them, but the mother tends to come and get them, and that is the you're being saved by the ones that abuse you. And that's a popular thing, and I think you'll allude to that shortly. Again, that is another mind control element to this. Stripped naked, and then these are grown people, adults, men and women. So let's dispel this myth that child abuse is just perpetrated and orchestrated by men. Absolute nonsense. Again, this is organised. They would strip naked. There would be chanting, swaying, the drinking of blood. And little Jeanette, the little naked 3-year-old, is placed in there while each member, men and women, took turns to do appalling things to this girl. And this would go on whilst they still chanted and swayed. And I mean, obviously, you know, a 3-year-old's body, you know, is not designed for that sort of abuse, so this would have left you with, I would have thought, injuries.
Oh god, yeah. So I mean, those sorts of rituals would end up with when it was all over, I would obviously be a very broken child, little body on the floor, covered, just saturated in body fluid. You know, whatever they wanted to do.
We know what body fluid that is,
in whatever form. You know, so then my mum would come back in. Once they'd all left, my dad, I would always hear my dad making sure everyone had paid him, and I'd just be in a crumpled little thing on the floor, and my mum would come in with a towel and sort of mop me up, get me dressed.
That's kind of her.
She didn't really do that.
And bear in mind what Jeanette said, that she was an undernourished 3-year-old, so she would have been underweight and underheight, you know. And she said sometimes there were other children. But then, we've had a long time to discuss this, but there's something you mentioned to me, and I want to take us to this place, if we may, and it's, again, you can see. The farm. Are you all right? Go ahead. Please listen to what Jeanette's got to say, and you can see what this is doing. What was the farm, Jeanette?
The farm was a place where satanic ritual abuse happened week in and week out. It was where children and babies were raped, tortured, murdered, sacrificed, buried. Children were abducted and brought there in vanfuls. Children were held captive in underground tunnels. There were a number of barns. One of the barns was where I would be held captive. I was used for rituals a lot. So I would be shackled in this barn before being led out. Rituals there were, I think, the extreme ritual process of satanic ritual abuse. The houses, mock-up's probably a bit of, not the best phrase to use, but they weren't as intense with how detailed they went into. So in the farm rituals, for example, I would be held captive in a barn probably for a day or even 2 days.
Can you just describe the barn? A barn is an outbuilding of a farm.
So this,
size-wise,
this particular barn was, I'm not very good with size-wise, I would say 15 foot long, but open fronted. Right. So the front was open. Yeah. Other barns weren't, but this one was. So I would be held captive there before a ritual, and I would be starved. They had what was called a cleansing process, so tubes would be stuck down my throat and fluids pushed through. I would have tubes stuck up, through my bottom and flushed out. So it's like a cleansing ritual, and then I was put in the white gowns before being led out for the rituals. Next to that barn there was like a little smaller outbuilding, and in there was what we used to call the electric chair, and that was a place of torture. So if you were put in that chair, you were given electric shocks.
Did that happen to you?
Yeah. Every form of torture, like the electric chair, was to tell you that you must never speak out. Yeah. It was part of that. Yeah. In that open fronted barn, I had the end where I was, all my chains were, but then a bit further down there was a little doorway in the floor that lifted up, and the grandfather, my father's father, who ran the farm.
So this is intergenerational with your...
Yes.
So your grandfather had sort of governance of this farm?
He was top dog on the farm, yeah.
He was top dog. The part of the UK, are we talking the Midlands, the South?
We're talking Surrey.
Surrey. And it's quite ironic because Surrey crops up in Audrey Harper's book. Carolyn Bramall also says that Surrey is an epicentre. It's a wealthy area, they call it the stockbroker belt. and it's a very, very wealthy county. So you get taken to this farm, which has got numerous outbuildings. Your grandfather is a Satanist as well as your father, so therefore your father would have enjoyed this, I would have thought, as a child.
I expect so.
Yeah. And then you were chained up, you were stripped, you are then flashed out with pipes, and I wouldn't have thought there'd be any anaesthetic when they did that.
Oh, no.
It was done with it. And both front and both back, and then placed in white gowns. And then we're talking about an electric chair where obviously you're put in there and voltage is passed through there. Can we go on to?
So the underground, the little box was also the grandfather's torture tools. So there was lots of things in there that he would use.
Like what do you remember?
There were things that were used, like hot pokers that were put inside me. Lots of things for suffocation, like different types.
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, masks and.
Vicky Ash goes on about hot pokers inside the back.
Yeah,
and things
well,
like that.
front was for me more so.
And again, can you imagine? Well, I'm saying it to them, people out there, Jeanette, the injuries. If you burn yourself, scald yourself on a cooker or something, can you imagine deliberately having something placed into your anus or into your vagina? Can you please try and imagine? Right, and there'll be no anaesthetic. No one's coming to administer a painkiller to a poor little child.
I think the best thing was if I passed out, then I wouldn't feel it, you know. So, but I remember the intense pain leading up to being able to pass out. So that was that barn, and then there was another barn that had meat hooks lined up in there, and children were put on the meat hooks.
Can you describe to us how they were put on there?
Literally picked up and put on in the back.
On their back?
Yeah, so the hook would go in the back. They would be alive.
How old were these children, do you recall?
They were all about, you know, I used to go by my size, so I would say they were all around the same sort of age, you know. I mean, if I was on the farm from around 3 to 9 or 10 years old, so anything really in that age range.
What was the purpose of placing a frightened, in pain child on meat hooks? What would they get out of that?
They had probably been, these would probably have been abducted children, and they would have been used for rituals, and this is one of the ways they killed them.
Right.
And then so what they would do is, the likes of us children like myself within the family of this would have to sit in that barn whilst this was happening, and then again being told, this is what happened to you. You know, so there was so much of this.
But when that was going on, what were the adults doing?
What do you mean?
How was the ceremony run? Who was
this
putting them on
wasn't really a ceremony. This was more the grandfather clearing up. This was like kids. The ceremonies would have been done.
Would that kill the child?
The meat hook?
Yeah.
No, but what they'd have done was he would put them on the meat hook, and pretty much instantly he would slash them from there to there and open them up.
So that entire body cavity would be opened up?
Yes.
What would happen to their organs?
He would use his hands to pull it out, and it would all go into a bucket below.
And the purpose of that? Did you ever find out?
Well, another thing that I used to have to endure once I was taken to the meat hooks was he would make me eat out of the bucket.
What would you eat?
The innards. Whatever.
And if you didn't eat?
Oh, yeah, I mean, that was punishable. He would make me eat until I vomited.
Well, I wonder you're a vegetarian, isn't it? I mean, you can't, you know...
Yeah, I don't do rotting flesh anymore.
No.
Yeah, not voluntarily.
Okay, right, so we've had, you know, this, you were saying there were other barns and they were used for different purposes.
Yeah, so
what else can you recall?
The meat hook barn, and then there was what we'd sort of see as the fancy barn. So this was bigger, it was 2 levels. There was always straw, like hay bales in there. Now this barn was where what we used to call the important people when they used to come to the farm.
What does that mean?
That means the people that my grandfather used to answer to, because apart from the important people, my grandfather was top dog. No one would dare say boo to him. Everyone was his lackey. They did everything he said.
Can you just describe your grandfather so we get an idea of what he looked like? And there was something you said about him that was quite poignant.
That he was, I don't know what I said to you, but
his eyes.
Oh gosh, I mean, yeah, he was like a walking dead person. I mean, he didn't have nothing. There was nothing in his eyes. And you know, I can say this with such clarity because I used to look and try and find something, because when you're going through such horrific abuse by the people that are supposed to love and protect you, I used to look for something that I could almost manipulate.
Yeah,
you know?
with
So it's like if I saw some kind of something in there, I could use that and maybe...
It's an emotional lever.
Exactly. You know, I used to do it with my mum and my dad. But my grandfather, nothing. He was just dead eyes, empty. There was never anything there. He never flinched with every single thing I ever saw him do, from meat hooks to chopping up bodies to all the stuff. I never saw him flinch.
This might go some way to explaining why we've got world leaders that can actually take young boys into war and sleep with it and live with it, you know?
No conscience.
No conscience whatsoever. Because people say to me, how do these people sleep at night? Well, they do.
Well, isn't it
They
called
do.
psychopathic?
Psychopathy, yeah, psychopathy.
Tendencies.
So we're going on about important people. So your grandfather being top of the tree really on a domestic level, but there is a hierarchy here.
There is.
So he's answering to everyone else. And the important people, were they men? Were they women?
With the important people, they were men. So they would come to the farm in groups of 3, 4, 5, 6, in suits, always very smartly dressed, very confident, I think is the word I would use,
Right.
arrogant. And they would demand that there were a handful of us kids put in the big barn, the fancy barn, waiting their arrival.
And what would happen when they turned up?
They would have their own alcohol, drugs, so they would start partying, really.
Right.
And then
And where were you children?
in there having to watch. So
Right.
we would just sort of be, cowering in the corner until they decided to drag us out and start. It would normally start with sexual abuse, sort of like orally, and making us, do things to them orally, and until eventually it was, we would all be raped in turn and swapped around, and take it in turns of swap from one to the
So
other.
this is incredibly well organised.
Exceptionally
So,
well
yeah.
organised, yeah.
Was there anything unique about these men? Were they of the same sort of ilk? Were they well dressed? Was it, were they posh speaking? Were they common? Were they?
They were not. They didn't speak like us, let's
Like
put it
we
that way,
do.
like we do. They were very posh, very posh.
And the reason I say this, Jeanette, because if we remember the testimony of Darren, he sort of says very similar, that these guys, usually 3 to 6, would take them, would beat them, and then would rape them. They were all posh. And this is things that have come out in the government inquiries as well. And afterwards, I put Darren in touch with the solicitors for the government inquiry, and he named one of his abusers as Bishop Peter Bull, who had previous for whipping and raping boys. And he said that there was a big inquiry into Bishop Peter Bull. There was, So this very ties in with what you're saying. So you've got to a stage where the kids, there's a party, there's these important people, they are posh people. The point of contact is the grandfather. The grandfather brings them to this barn where there is alcohol, there is partying, there are drugs, and then the children are dragged out. The abuse starts with oral abuse and it goes on to full rape. Does anything else happen after that?
Well, that would go on for quite some time. Their finishing thing would be they would then pick up their sticks that they would bring themselves.
What were these sticks like?
I want to say the term like cat o' nine tails, but it wasn't that. It wasn't like loads of bits, but it wasn't just one solid stick.
Right.
It would have like,
Strands coming
yeah.
Were they thick? Were they heavy sticks or?
They were more the sort of sticks that when you were hit with them, instead of, like if someone knocked you over the head with a big
Yeah, a bit
thick, it
clump.
would knock you out, it would be a
Yeah.
clump. This was more of a sting,
Like a cane.
whipping type of pain. And what they would do once they'd finished the raping, and we were all just in a crumpled heap on the floor anyway, they would then pick up these things they had and whip us all until we were bleeding, and then they would leave.
I want people to try and imagine and then draw parallels. I've been doing some research into the public school, the posh school system, in which whipping and raping of young boys was commonplace. Schools such as Eton, Harrow, Winchester, Radley. There's more than one testimony. There's a lot of people who made these testimonies, and these are places that are staging posts, are training centres for future prime ministers. Who are these people? Why are they doing this, and how are they allowed to do this? And we are going to go on. Jeanette is exceptional in as much as she's got total clarity. I speak to many, many people that end up so heavily traumatised they have what they call DID, dissociated identity disorder, in which they will fracture their mind, and their minds will have been fractured in many places due to the drowning, due to the whipping, due to this. And
Trauma.
And of course then they get attacked by people such as Jean de La Fontaine and many other so-called government academics that bring about this false memory syndrome, where they do their best to try and smash these people when they get to court. So imagine coming forward, making testimonies, and we are going to get to the police investigation shortly without naming names or places, and how there is this reluctance to investigate. And I think there's something that will be mentioned which will probably go a long way to explaining why that happens. But just please, if you have children, try and imagine, not only the pain but the fear, and this isn't just a one-off. This was Jeanette's life, time and time and time again. Jeanette, the farm, how much of that was part of your life? From what age group?
I'd say from 3 to 10.
So 7 years
Yeah.
of this. And how often would it occur?
Oh gosh, that's a really hard one actually, but I would say, I think if I use the word regularly, it's very hard for me to get pinpoint days and how long
course.
that was. And
Well,
I was
trauma
always-
does that.
Yeah, and
Trauma
drugs
will do
were
that.
used, and so.
And this is something that they attack victims with as well, and it's been well cited that trauma will cause a dyspraxia of like a chronology, as it were,
Yeah, of course.
Now, there's something that I would like to ask you, and I think people will be asking, if they're doing this, killing these children, what are they doing to the bodies? Where do the bodies go?
Okay, so on the farm there was, it used to be called the well.
Right.
It wasn't a well as such, it was a huge big hole in the ground, big dugout hole. The little bodies went in there. My grandfather would often pick me up and hang me over the hole. And there were just layers of bodies, dead babies in there. And then the top layer, which he used to make me get really close to, there would often be a young toddler or something in there that was still alive, but like looking up at me, so I would have eye contact. Or you'd just see sort of wriggling going on. I would know that they're not dead yet. Oh, yeah, of course, it stunk. I mean,
Where were the babies coming from?
These were either, again, abducted children, or they were supplied by breeders.
I hear this a lot, breeders, I hear this term. And the range list, again, people dismissing this range list, dissing it as it were, look at the accuracy of this range list and look at the people that are on there, right, and they go on about breeders. What is a breeder?
A breeder is somebody that they use to impregnate, and then they will hold captive through that pregnancy, and then they will induce that pregnancy, normally around 8 months.
How would they induce it?
So, my experience of that what I had seen with my own eyes is that I didn't see inducing. I saw babies being cut out of bodies, but I do have. I do know another survivor of SRA that was used as a breeder, and her own mother induced her pregnancy with whatever drugs.
Right, there is a drug. There is
something, and it was induced. So I don't know technically how they do that.
If anyone, I always mention about this book, it's called Dances with the Devil by Audrey Harper, and she's actually gone to the police, and she's told the police everything, and she was involved in satanic rituals, and she goes to say about the breeders exactly what you said. And this, again, is well documented, you know, and she used to say sometimes the best thing for these children was to be killed, because their lives, they were already given up to that. You know, we have to ask ourselves, what is the point of all this? What did they gain out of this?
I don't think anybody with a healthy mind can ever answer that question.
No.
How could I ever answer that question? What I would say, what I saw was just the power trip and the control. And
what was the demeanour of the people that are doing it? Did they seem that they were uncomfortable doing it?
There was a mix of that, actually. So you would have the likes of my grandfather, completely nothing, and then, you know, I did witness people on the farm that I could see they were really terrified. I mean, adults, you know, really terrified and really sort of like scurrying around and making sure they were doing all the right thing, and you could see that they didn't want to be there. Yeah. So I think, you know, that they, could I go as far to say they're victims too? I don't know, but that's maybe.
Well, everyone has a choice, and it's like Corinne Hustebart says, you know, they may blame duress because of this cult that they're in, this secret society, but at the end of the day they have a choice, and they chose to do it. She said they do this because they enjoy it. Were there people that clearly enjoyed doing what they were doing?
100%, yeah.
Men and women?
Men and women, and they would be the people that would take part in the rituals. The people that were more sort of fearful and scurrying around, the sort of lackeys, they were the ones that got the leftovers.
Did they ever make a mention of a deity or anything like that? Or?
Well, Satan, that word's thrown around all day long. Personally, I think Satan is just who they are. It lives within them. I think that's their own.
I think that is the essence of Satanism, that they are God and they can do what they want, and they obviously do.
It's just an excuse.
I mean, the question has to be asked: how the hell? Well, it's the wrong term, but how did they get away with it? Now we're going to jump the timeline, but there is a reason for this. If you want to know what happened, Jeanette actually reported this on 2 occasions to the police. I've seen the investigating officers' names, and I can vouch for one of them because one of them is a good friend of mine, and I know was a hard-working detective and on this unit. So it did go to both the Metropolitan Police and to the Surrey Police, and you actually attended this farm, and you instructed the police where to dig. Yeah. What did they do?
Well, it was going really well, and then I had, because there was 2 police things involved, and so the Met and Surrey Police were involved. Yeah, so it was all going really well. This investigation was going on for 18 months. I mean, when I say I bared my soul and then some. You know, I gave them every single thing I possibly could. I took them everywhere, houses, farm, you know, everywhere. So it was going really well, and then I'd taken them to the farm and showed them where the well was, and, you know, that there were bodies in the woods, and, you know,
and if they dug, they would have found
100%. So
and they never.
So they came to my house and said, look, you know, this is what's going to happen. They used the sort of term going live. We're going to be going live. Is that what they say?
Well,
something like that. You know, as in it's going to kick off basically. Yeah. They've got protection in place for me and all this stuff. And then a few days later, I had a couple of people come back quite high up and said, we're closing it down. Boom, done.
Any explanation?
Well, one of the explanations was that because I told them that my grandfather drove the van, which, you know, had the children in the back, they said, sorry, that couldn't have been true because he didn't have a driving licence and he rode a bicycle.
Now, if we look at the interview I did with James Reeves came forward and said that Ted Heath would attend Hampstead Heath and the Spaniards Inn and Jack Straw Castles in his car and he was driving. They dismissed his evidence that he was picking up boys based on purely that. It was later proved that Ted Heath never had a licence and would drive. I mean, they were just
Why would they think he'd care?
What would it matter?
No.
This man is killing babies, raping children, organising atrocities that are beyond comprehension, and the fact that he didn't abide by the provisions of the Road Traffic Act, it's just absolutely unbelievable.
So,
but we'll get to that at some point, you know, when with the police involvement on there. But so at about 7 years old, the farm, wasn't the only venue. We went on earlier on, prior to this, and you was mentioning about a flat you went to, and it was your grandfather's flat. Can we talk about that? Because this was a place of child pornography.
So that was set up for torture, and
Where in the world was this?
So this was back now in South West London.
Okay, right.
His flat was set up, there was two different areas, so it could be two children in one time, but there was always photos being taken and video being used. So that was set up on proper
What were they
filming.
taking photos and video of?
Me being abused and tortured, suffocated, burnt, again, hot iron pokers.
So these are
everything.
torture videos as well?
They were torture videos every time. This wasn't just I say just but this wasn't you'd go there, be raped and filmed. You'd be tortured. I would be tortured every single time.
So it was being filmed. Aside from the people that were doing it, were there anyone else ever present?
Yeah, so there would always be a handful of other men and women that would come in.
Men and women?
Men and women. My mother would always be there, sort of stroking my head, saying, there, never mind, Mum is here. So a lot of that went on. But over the road from this flat were police flats, so police would come into that situation and watch.
So there was police accommodation building
in
South West London, and the officers that live in there, how do you know they were police?
Because they would have their uniforms on.
What would they do?
They would stand and watch the torture being filmed.
Would they just watch in, or?
No, they'd be masturbating. There were also times in that same police flats over there where we'd be taken into those police flats and be given to them. So they were involved, yeah.
I don't want to make this at all about me, but I want to say this because it bolsters up what you were saying. There was information given about a police accommodation block, not in South West London, but in South East London, and it was corroborated, and it was boys were taken in there, and there was allegations that child porn was made in there. It's open knowledge what I did when I spoke out, and the attack that came on me. So doesn't this go a long way to explain why there has to have an attack on me, and there has to have a discontinuation of your testimony?
Yeah. Because also the farm, can I just say here, is Crown Estate. Belongs to the Crown.
Crown Estate. And the investigating team were well aware of this?
Yeah.
You know, we are seeing this failing time and time again when we had people like Leon Britton as a Home Secretary who had the overarching governance for the police and the investigations, and he was named time and time again. Him and many other handful of select MPs. Some we can mention, some we can't. You know, how dare they, you know, British public? You've got to wake up. You have to wake up. There's a little feather landed there. You've got to wake up to what is going on here. All right, and please continue. So we had this. I'm going to recap. We've done from 3 years old the abuse that poor Jeanette endured. And then we go on, it's not just a father, grandfather seems to be sort of like the grand wizard or whatever you call him, the grand slug and all this. Then has this property that he runs, this farm down in Surrey. Okay, again, Surrey is mentioned many times, and that has been corroborated. In this farm is a collection of barns where different abuse and rituals, satanic rituals and abuse involving just rape and torture children go on, okay? Steve, we will discuss that later. Please get in touch with us afterwards. And then from there is this elite sort of barn where the important people go. Men, posh men, that would party, drink, take drugs, and then engage in the rape of children. This isn't an orgy, this is rape, and this is torture of children. They would then whip and beat them. Not only that, children were hung on butcher's hooks. They were then garroted, their gizzards were cut open. Jeanette was made to eat that. There was a pit where children and babies were thrown into, and some of them were alive, and Jeanette was made to sort of go down and held over it. Okay, so, and then the granddad will also have his flat in South West London, where she'll be taken for the purpose of rape and torture videos of this young infant child, junior child, school case, little infant age child. And what has sort of made my legs wobble is that this was near to a police accommodation building, which was what is termed as a section house. The police are aware of this. Jeanette has made disclosures, and again there has been a discontinuance for the most bullshit reason. Okay, that police officers not only would attend to watch these rape and torture child porn videos, they would watch and attend and masturbate. Some of them were in uniform or half uniform, as really was the case. A lot of cops would travel about in what they call half blues, but Jeanette was also taken into this accommodation building for the same purpose. And this has been corroborated by another police section house, which has been named at the independent inquiry. And again, anyone who speaks about this is attacked, and I've been attacked. Poor Camilla Batman-Gillage, who had Kids Company, spoke out and was attacked. Meg Oliver was attacked. Lenny Harper was attacked. We are not liars. We are decent public servants. We are not liars, and we are attacked. So if we're attacked as coppers and discredited by these disgusting chief constables, these vile chief constables that we've got, commissioners, they're the ones behind this. Okay, then what hope does someone like Jeanette? Now Jeanette, as you can see, is incredibly articulate and has got high IQ and has got compassion and drive. What about those that weren't fortunate enough, that ended up engaging in a life of criminality, dysfunctionality, drugs, alcohol, depression, and everything else? And they are so easy to discredit, so easy to discredit. That's taken us really up until your sort of infant years, and you've not even gone into the juniors, as it were. But there was two people and it was Doreen and her husband. We
Her
went.
affair. Her husband. I think they were having an affair.
Oh,
So,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, and they had a flat. This lady and her partner or whatever it is. What was it about
Let's
this flat?
name them. Doreen and Brian.
Doreen and Brian. Okay, we're not going any further than that. But I slipped up with Doreen and Brian. May you rot in hell.
Because I'd like, if there's anyone out there that
Yeah,
knows this, to
no,
come forward.
of course.
because, you know,
Yeah. So they had this flat.
Yeah, so they would come to my house in where we lived, and my mum would get me ready, and they'd
What
take me
would
away.
that mean? Get you ready?
Well, make sure I'm dressed, shoes on, and ready to get out the door. So just basically make sure I'm there waiting for them. So
Right,
they would
okay.
come and collect me. They would put me in their car and drive me to wherever their flat was in London.
Yeah.
Wasn't too long a drive, so I'm not sure where it was. And their flat was set up for torture, and I would be taken there. And yeah, that was pretty brutal. That was.
Can for the people out there, can you say it's set for torture? They might not have a clue. Would you be able to allude and go into a bit more detail as to what that means?
Okay, so what that means is that I would be chained up, shackled. I would have various things put over my face for suffocation. I would have clamps put on my body, on my chest or on my vagina, or lots of things that hurt. They would leave me in the corner with a bucket. I wasn't allowed to use the toilet, so if I needed the loo, I had to go in the bucket. And I would be there for long periods of time because they would sleep and they'd wake up and then they'd eat and then it'd start all over again. When I was unchained, I would be put onto their bed, and Doreen used to suffocate me, like push down on my throat, whilst he would be raping me.
How old was you, Jeanette?
Again, this would have been this was regular again, so this would have been between the years of, I'd say actually maybe between 5 and 9. Yeah.
When they were doing this, was there any sort of maternal compassion from Doreen at all?
No. In fact, she was probably worse. She was worse. She was evil. And she used to instruct him, so it's like he was it's like this dominant thing going on.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, he never,
Yeah, he
it's
didn't
not like he
protest.
did exactly.
Yeah.
It's not like he didn't want to do it. But she would be instructing every step of the way of where to. She was an absolute expert in child torture.
Did she have her own children?
I don't know.
There's a lady, all I would say is her name is Jenny. She's been through very, very similar to yourself, and she would say the same. It was, they were foster parents that were doing it to her, and it was the wife that was instructing the man. These couple went on to win national awards for their services to ethnic and disabled children in care, and they were doing the same. So to the outside world, these are beautiful people that are benevolent to children, and who knows what happens when that door is shut. Now, someone's put, I think they put adrenochrome, I think you mean adrenochrome. Now let's talk about this. Adrenochrome is a keyword that's bandied about, this chemical that comes from the adrenal glands of frightened and tortured children. Every child that went through and endured what Jeanette has, and even Jeanette herself would have excreted this thing, and then it would come out in the blood, and maybe that's why they drink the blood.
Okay.
From the so look, people going about what's happening to America, these kids in tunnels. This farm had tunnels.
Yeah, I had underground tunnels.
So we haven't got to look to America. We can distance ourselves because it's America. This is going on here in our home counties, in our villages, in every little leafy avenue. Before we move away from the farm, if we may, can you just tell us a little bit about these tunnels? I know we've jumped a little bit, but it just came to mind.
Yeah, the tunnels were, they had two that I remember very clearly. It might have been 3, but separate, like I called them cells down there. So
Right.
they were...
How would you access it?
Okay, so there was a lift-up door,
Right.
and then there would be steps down.
Right, okay.
So I would be taken down there, generally post-ritual,
Right.
and just put in one of the cells, door locked up, and left there.
Right.
It was always very cold and very damp down
Right.
there. And then quite often, I would be, when I was in the underground tunnel cells, I would have already been tortured and abused and everything, so I would have been in a lot of pain. So it was kind of my place where I'd just curl up in a ball and pray that no one would come and get me for a long time, Cause
Was you alone down there?
No, I wasn't. There were other children down there. Do you know what? There's something I'd really like to mention here, because I want to pay tribute to this little boy. And
I was going to mention that actually.
yeah, so this little boy, his name was Ben, and ever since I met Ben, I've always wondered about how his parents may have never ever known what happened to him. And he had been abducted and brought to the farm, and he was chucked in the barn where I was tied up, like shackled, and he was chucked next to me and terrified. So he was smaller than me. So I cuddled him, and then before long I'd been taken out and used in a ritual, abused, and then I was put in the underground tunnel. And then what happened, however long later, I don't know, Ben was brought down into the tunnels and chucked in the same cell as me. And I knew at that point that his life now had just been completely demolished. He wasn't the child that they brought in, you know.
Yeah.
And I was in so much pain, but I never forget him, because I moved my body as much as I could, and I cuddled him again, and I just held him, and we just had the energy to look at each other and just have eye contact. And then time must have passed, because I must have dozed off, and I remember waking up, coming round, and feeling freezing, but colder than normal. And what I then realised was it was because Ben had died and was cold, and I was holding his cold
body.
body.
Broken, cold body.
Yeah.
How old was Ben?
Ben was, I'd say, 3 years old at the most. He was very little.
Can we remember what sort of year this was? How old was you?
So I would have been this would probably been around 1973-ish.
Oh.
He was beautiful. He was blonde, blue-eyed, he was chubby.
Well, this is what they want.
Yeah. But, he was so different. I knew when abductees came in, because they looked different to us.
Right.
They were normal, healthy children. We looked like crap.
But let's put this out. Listen, we have to, and this is wrong, that we have to tread lightly because we're going to offend someone or name someone. These are people that are killing and murdering children. Okay, this isn't a mental rant at all. Right? There was a young kid called Ben that went missing circa 1973 in the Surrey area. A little blonde head. Someone out there would have known him. Someone out there would have missed him. There will be a missing persons. Maybe this file's never been shut. Now it's time to put this little kid to rest and to shut this case. And it's time that the Metropolitan Police and the Surrey Police or whatever, the National Crime Agency, whoever now has governance for this, this is time for the Home Secretary to get onto this. There are people out there, right, that live in Surrey. You have MPs, you have MEPs. You need to write to your MP now, and you need to get the Home Secretary to get back onto this. This farm needs excavating now. I want a campaign of letter writing to go ahead now, right, in the name of this little poor soul, Ben. I want all of us to write to our MPs in the name of Ben, to write to the Home Secretary that this investigation is reopened now. So stop sitting there and watching these videos and getting entertainment out of this, because this will continue unless we stop it and we put an end to this now. They are our servants, the Metropolitan Police, under the guidance of Cressida Dick and whoever moron is running Surrey Police now. They need to earn their stripes and their pips and their ribbons and whatever else they wear around them, and they need to serve the public like they are paid to do and get this farm excavated now. Okay? This video needs to be sent to the Metropolitan Police. This video needs to be put on YouTube. This video needs to go to Surrey Police, to the National Crime Agency, to your MPs and to the Home Secretary. Burn it to a disc, put it on YouTube, do whatever you want. This needs to go out there now. There is no point doing these videos. I'm not like these other podcasters who sit there and do these videos so they can sit there and listen to gangsters saying, I shot him, I stabbed him, I did this. Sod all that. There is a purpose behind this. This is a witness project for poor souls, brave people like Jeanette to come forward, to get others to come forward, to put an end to this horrific genocide of our children. Alright? This needs now to go to these so-called public servants and to do something about it. Alright? And I will be disappointed to everyone who watches my videos and sits there and goes, John Wades is a good guy if you do nothing about this. I am absolutely riled. Right, sorry.
Don't say sorry.
Can I have a cup of tea? Is that alright?
It's nice to have someone fighting my corner.
Oh man, I'll fight your corner
I've
till
carried this burden for all these years.
You know, this has to stop. Jeanette, this has to stop. This is why we do
You
this.
know what? There's so many Bens. There were so many. My own sister was ripped out of my arms and murdered in front of me. And she's buried in the woods that surround it, you know. Ben's down that hole with all the others, you know.
What is the point of us continuing if nothing is done? They say to me, Jeanette, what can we do, John? What can we do? There are clever, intelligent people out there. There are civil servants out there. There are people that watch us who've got families in the police. That, you know, what is the point in you doing your job if you go home and you put your back to this? What is the point of any of you? What are the point of you church leaders? Are there people out there that are part of a church? Well, give this to your bishop and see what he does, provided it's not Bishop Bolt. Give this to them. What about the House of Lords? What the House of Lords doing? There's a Lord Bernard Hogan Hell. What are you doing about this, Lord Bernard? Right, who's the other one? That was Lord Blair that was in charge of the Met Police. What are you doing about this? Lord George Carey, instead of protecting paedophiles like Peter Ball, you do something about this. If you're a spiritual leader, you do something. Because I know what God you're worshipping, mate. And it's not the same one I do. You know, we will move forward. Jeanette's not finished. And I'm not finished. And we will continue. I don't think that we need to go too far now, Jeanette. But I want us just to go on that, you know, this didn't stop. You know, if I may just prompt you, from the age of 9, your father left, but your mum continued. You went with your mum.
Well, I just want to backtrack just one little bit, because what I do want to, I think is important that people know as well, is that another place, another venue, was a morgue.
Yes.
a mortuary in a local
Right.
hospital in southwest London.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So my grandfather, the two men that run this morgue would allow my grandfather access. Bodies were used, dead bodies were used. In the rituals that were held in the morgue, bodies were, I assume, freshly dead, would be what they would call bled. So they would be cut on the neck and on the ankles, and the blood would come out, and all the children would be sat round. They would bring children into the morgue from the hospital, because they would come in their hospital gowns. Various children were murdered within these rituals. The Satanists, my mother and father and various others, would have sex with these dead bodies. And children were raped and murdered and basically made to swim around in the blood of these dead bodies. And I think it's really important because there's more missing children there. You know, these children were taken from the hospital.
If we look at the history of hospitals, we had Jimmy Savile, who's been proved to have been a Satanist. Jimmy Savile, who spent numerous consecutive Christmases with Margaret Thatcher, friends with Prince Charles and Prince Philip, and a procurer of children for rapes and everything else. Jimmy Savile was given the keys to the mortuary at Leeds Royal Infirmary, which it has been mentioned that he was having sex with dead bodies. I know that from my police work that if you have sex with dead bodies, there's a bacteria that is released, which it's got its own unique sexually transmitted disease, which only comes from dead bodies. So people are having sex with dead bodies and then passing it. These are your relatives that are dying in dignity in hospital. And these are fresh because the blood has to be exsanguinated, and therefore, otherwise you leave it any longer, it won't flow. So they are getting fresh bodies. This is organised. These are morticians that are linking in with Jeanette's father, then informing him, and they are taking other children, some from the hospitals, down into this mortuary, a place of death where these bodies are sliced open, and they are then having sex with the bodies and then having sex with the children. Now, you also said that your mother had sex with the corpses as well.
Yeah.
How would that even work?
She would sit on top of one and have sex with it. How it works, God knows. But that's what I saw.
Yep.
In this particular one that I'm remembering is my mum on top of one dead body and my dad on top of another dead body, side by side. And there was this very distinct thing that would happen outside of the whole chanting of the ritual.
Oh, so there'd be chanting.
Chanting. It was always chanting.
Right.
The distinct thing, when a person, one of these Satanists, were on top of having sex with a dead body, they would make this squealing sound. It was very distinct. It was almost like an animal.
Right.
It was like squealing sound, and it was awful. And that every time there was this situation, I would hear that they're making this sound.
My word. There's obviously a reason for that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, but what was there anything else that went on during this ritual? I mean, surely there would have been blood everywhere.
Although there were, in this morgue, I remember the floor was very slightly tilted.
Well, yeah,
so
there's
the blood
a reason.
so the blood would run down.
Yes, there's a reason for that, yeah.
But it was everywhere. Blood was everywhere. We would come out saturated in blood until they got the hoses out. And the children that would have been murdered obviously didn't get out, and us that were coming back to the families would be hosed down.
So some kids were murdered in there?
Yes, yeah. And if we were lucky, the lucky ones, you'd be hosed down and chucked back in the back of the van and taken home.
And this is a hospital in the Surrey area and
Southwest London,
this hospital, and the mortuary assistants were involved in it. They'd be squealing, so this would have been heard. This would have resonated, and again, where were the security? Where were the matrons? Where was anyone else to put an end to this? This just goes to show the complicit nature of this and how much it's linked in. But again, it's not. I have heard it before. I have, and there's been enough in the press about this as well. So Jimmy Savile was highlighted with Jimmy Savile.
Mortuaries?
Yeah. Sex with dead bodies in mortuaries. Oh dear.
Yeah.
So with all of that, you also end up being pimped out by your mother.
Yeah.
Who would the clients would that be?
So when I was 9 or 10, my mum left my dad, which meant we left the farm and the grandfather.
Right.
And then what my mum continued to do was take me we then moved over to West London. She changed our names illegally. She moved us straight in with a man that became stepdad. We changed our name to his.
Right.
She persuaded the local school to take us without the legal papers because she wanted us to have a different name.
So how could she have persuaded the school?
Because she allowed the headmaster to abuse me. I was the payoff.
Right, so this is a primary school in West London. You've moved in with a new bloke. Was stepdad a good man?
He wasn't as bad as I was used to.
Was he an abuser?
No, but actually what happened was my mum made that happen. So she took me into a bedroom with him and made me give him oral sex. Now he was protesting and trying to stop it. She made that happen, but he never came near me again.
Right, okay. So we got a headmaster.
Yeah.
So your mum obviously was comfortable enough to make that suggestion to the headmaster.
Totally.
So there must have been some sort of connection.
Connection.
Yeah. And the headmaster abused you. Now, what do you mean by that?
Well, he would call me into his office during school days and just make me do stuff to him, do stuff to me, just sexually abuse in general.
Whilst school was in session?
Yeah, so he'd pull me out of the classroom and take me in his office. And she took me to various pubs and sold me to men with white vans, and I'd be driven off and raped in the back of them, come back, they'd pay her, she'd bring me home.
So a grown man in pubs. White vans are presumably they're builders or whatever.
Yeah, traders.
Your traders or whatever. So he's a grown man in working class pubs that are sexually preying on this girl of 9, 10 years old. And I would assume, I don't want to feed any words, that you were still quite a slight...
Oh God, yeah, I was by this time I was very, very underweight. Very underweight. So that really all stopped around 12, 13.
Why?
Probably because I was going into puberty and that's it, done.
Yeah, it's something that is common and is mentioned a hell of a lot.
She did allow the step-uncle, the brother of this man that we moved in with,
Yeah.
to carry on sexually abusing me. So she would call me down from upstairs and let him take me in the front room, and she'd just shut the door. But yeah, it stopped after that.
You're 13 years old at this point, Jeanette. I mean, I don't even know where to start or finish. What has this done to little 13-year-old Jeanette's mind?
Well, I didn't have one. I was empty. There was nothing. I was a void. I was...
How was you behaving? What happened in your life
I
at this
think what I
point?
started to realise is that I had to not ever let anyone find out. So I would just pretend and learnt to be able to pretend and hide behind whatever I could hide behind. I think I started drinking at 13, 14. I'd say by sort of 15 I was probably drink dependent. I relied on drink and drugs, not too bad on the hard drugs because I'd been given them a lot as a kid and they terrified me, the class A's. But cannabis, I couldn't go to bed without being stoned because falling asleep was terrifying to me. You know, my father used to wait till I fall asleep and then come into my bedroom and put a pillow over my face.
Which is what Darren went on about a lot. You know, he
Yeah.
was totally vacant all through his life because
Yeah.
he was too frightened to sleep. So,
Yeah.
you know, what Jeanette has said to me, and one of the conditions of giving this interview, and she has really, really sort of turned down an alternative to do this, and I'm so grateful. Dennis, was that Jeanette is coming from a position of someone who's healed and in the process of healing. She wants others to come forward. She doesn't want people to suffer in silence. She doesn't want the suicides. She doesn't want the drug addiction, the alcoholism, and this cycle to continue. And one thing Jeanette is insistent on is to really a message of hope and how you have become such a wholesome, strong and compassionate individual. How the hell have you managed this, Jeanette?
Literally blood, sweat and tears. So I think I was in denial because what happened was, and I'm going to just go bump here because I can't handle any more trauma.
No, I'm with you.
At age sort of 14, something like that, I was raped in school by a few young adults that came in from outside. Me and this other friend of mine, we were raped. After that gang rape, I hid in a cupboard. I don't know what amount of time passed, but by the time I left that cupboard, I'd shut down every single memory I had.
Right.
Boom, done, gone. And then from 14 to like 28,
Yep.
I did whatever it took to never let them come up.
Right.
Never to feel it, never to remember it. I did whatever it took. So that was obviously alcohol, you know, cannabis, dysfunctional relationships, you know, you name it. At 28, I had for quite some time been planning my suicide. I lived in a flat, I was on the 8th floor, and my out, if you like, my absolute comfort was that I could jump off the balcony and it'd be over. So I sat one day and I made the decision of, okay, whatever happens, I can't carry on like this. I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was something I was hiding from myself. I knew there was something I was denying. And I actually prayed and I looked up and I said, okay, here's the deal. You show me what I'm hiding, or I'm gone. Okay? That was the option. I went to bed that night. I woke up the next day, had my very first flashback. Boom, right in front of me. It's like someone had put a TV screen in front of my face. And I got it. I got my answer. Flashback after flashback after flashback came literally for the next 5 years.
How did you cope with that?
Well, I didn't really. I mean, I was on my knees, to say the least, piecing it all together. It was a can of worms that opened. It was like everything I knew to be my reality crashed around my feet. And I was metaphorically and also literally at times on my hands and knees, just rummaging around trying to find something I could make sense of and piece together. What I had to realise is that I wasn't going to find it in that rubble. So I had to stand up and walk away. And then what that gave me was a completely clean slate of rebuilding. So I started to learn about who I was, as in, you know, what do I like, what do I don't like, what makes me laugh, I couldn't even see the world in colour. The world to me was in shades of grey. And my brain was so shut down. So I spent a lot of years sort of doing this, and I remember a turning point one day. I was sat in my car at the traffic lights, and I was like, oh my God, the traffic lights were just bright colour, because normally they're just dulcet tones. And I was like, oh, and I just had this overwhelming joy of, I can see colour. And I, just not a little thing, it's a big thing, but I was waking up, you know, and I was starting to, all the things they stole from me and smashed into a million pieces, self-worth, self-care, self-love, validation, you know, self-esteem, all these things that just weren't even in my reach, they weren't allowed to develop. I started to develop myself, whatever way that took. I have had 2 incredible therapists. I've explored many holistic things that have been wonderful. I've enjoyed it, I've moved on, I've taken something from that, and it's been a complete journey of exploration. So I think what it brings me to, John, is that what I want to say is, what I have now, having recovered, is what I have to give.
Yep.
And it's taken me to now, to do this, and unburden myself, because I thought doing the police investigation would free me of that burden, but in fact what it did, it made it heavier.
Oh,
It made
been
it
there,
worse,
yeah,
right.
I know.
So I need to do this, and I needed to have the courage to share my story with the world, so to speak, you know. What's important to me is that people realise the reality of satanic ritual abuse. My story, and I'm just going to say here, we have literally, this is the tip of the iceberg. The details I could give you are far beyond anything we've spoken about today. We've scratched the surface. I need people to know that this is the reality of satanic ritual abuse. And it is still happening.
Yeah.
It didn't just happen to me, it happened to thousands of children, and is still happening. That's very, very important to me. That's a big part of why I'm doing what I'm doing. The other thing is, many years ago when I started to heal, I had a moment, a very spiritual moment. I'm a big meditator, so I've meditated. That's really kept me in a very strong place. And I had this understanding come to me that if you view satanic ritual abuse as a tower, and you have all those big, important people at the top, we know how far it goes up, and then the bottom of that tower are the victims and the survivors. If every single one of those survivors could find their voice and break their silence, that you destabilise the tower.
Yes.
Now I know this because I lived in the middle of it.
Yeah.
I know how they function. I know the power trips that go on. But if you destabilise it from the bottom up, you destabilise it. So I've written one book telling my story in detail and part of the healing journey, and I want to write a trilogy, and I want to share how I did it, because I believe anyone can. When I was a very small child going through this, there was always a light that I could see. I just want to say as an aside here as well, I'm not religious, but I'm very spiritual, because that is who I am, ultimately, my soul. That light that I could see, I just kept walking towards it, and I knew I had to stay alive, And then, what happened was, I realised that light was shining from inside me, and I need to make it as bright as possible. So I've been writing for years. I've been on this recovery 25 years, since the age of 28, I'm now 53. So these books I want published, but I want the opportunity to set up safe places for survivors of satanic ritual abuse to be able to come and recover and get everything they need to do what I've done, because I know it's possible. And I know John said as well that this is the worst story he's ever heard. I believe I went through the worst story people have ever heard for this reason.
Yep.
Because if people can look at me and go, wow, well, she's done it, I can be that light. And believe me, I've never heard anyone that's been through what I've been through for that amount of time and those atrocities, and know what I know. So my plea, if you like, after doing this is, there's so much more to tell you, for starters, but also help me destabilise the tower.
Yep.
Help me do it.
Yep.
You know, I do need support. I can't do this by myself. I can't, and I don't want to.
Well, I think as a community out there, because it's what we are, a community, tens of thousands of people watch this, you know, even if everyone chipped in £1 to setting up an organisation, you know, I think we'd be going a hell of a long way. And you said that, like, now, what's going to happen now, Jeanette, is you are going to be a lighthouse. There are people out there in choppy waters. They are drowning. Yeah. They are in this storm. And you will become a beacon of light in which they will come, and they will come.
And that's why I've done what I've done.
Yeah. Now, there's a guy watching here. On a wave to him, Joseph Blair. Joseph and his brother Bobby. Their tale is so harrowing. Again, it will bring you to tears, and these people will be good for you to link in with. And there's so many others to link in with. Look, I'm not, someone said, tell people not to take things into their own hands. Look, I'm not on about vigilantism. What I'm on about is righteous anger and justice for children and survivors of this most appalling crime. And what are we as human beings if we allow this to continue unabated? We hold the power. Like Jeanette said,
No, sorry, can I just answer this? My parents are still alive.
Right,
out there.
Well, unless they Well,
Sorry,
I don't
John,
know.
carry on.
Yeah, no,
I
that's
just
all right.
wanted to
Well,
answer
right now, anyway, I know. So, you know, this is in our grasp. What we can't be is divided, Jeanette. We can't have any division. We get a lot of trolling on here. There will be attacks coming, and they'll come from the most disgusting, disturbed individuals. But I tell you what, you know, we're not even bothering you anymore. Joseph, hello. You know, the trolls, the paedophiles and the paedophile protectors will always attack, but they just expose themselves when they do. We don't worry about them anymore. But us good people, let's get together. Let's do something. Get in touch with myself. We are organising. We are actually sinking at the moment under the weight of help that we're getting. We need therapists on board. We need people to fund on board. We need fundraisers on board. We need people to know properties. We actually need a meeting as well. And we need the victims and survivors of this most monumentally horrific crime, right, which just destroys the souls of children, to end. We need to take back these souls. And please get in touch with me. I can put you in touch with Jeanette. Jeanette has just given her testimony. She's going to be a bit raw for a while, so, you know, please be mindful of that.
I'd really also like to be able to answer people's questions, because there's a lot of questions.
There are.
And I'm okay to do that, you know, when...
Yeah, I think at the moment... and I want to say something, that when I do these live podcasts, if I get 120 live people, that's a very, very good hit. We have exceeded 670, nearly 700 for the last hour. Okay, that is absolutely unprecedented. We will probably be on the 50,000 views by the time I finish this. This is looking like it's going viral. Please get this, send it all around the world, send it everywhere. I want people to start writing to the Commissioner of Police. I want people to start writing to their MPs. I want the Home Secretary, right, with letters on her table by the end of this week on this, okay? So I want to just finish now. I'm just going to ask my assistant there, Christine, are there any words regarding a prayer for Ben before we finish?
Yes.
Would you like to come and please take my mic? If we can, just make some room for Christine to come through.
Can I just say, sorry, while you're setting this up, because some people are asking about the book. I haven't had it published yet, so I need help with that.
Yeah.
I need help to get it published.
And please, before we go, please say the name of the book. All right, I'm going to just...
So the first book is going to be called There's Something We Need to Tell You. And that's me giving a voice to everybody.
Where can they buy this from?
Well, I haven't had it published
All right,
yet,
well,
so
come on.
I need
come
help
on.
to get it published.
Let's sort this out.
I need help to fund
Please.
destabilising the tower.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is what I need help with. I need venues, I need...
Christine, if you just hold, you can hold it. Yeah.
Manpower.
Right, and just, this is a prayer for Ben, so please.
I want to prelude this with something that you said earlier about angels.
Yeah,
It was beautiful.
thank you.
Lord, we know that angels exist. We know that Jeanette experienced angels. And we pray that Ben too experienced angels. We pray that he was comforted during those final hours of his life. We know that he was comforted by Jeanette. And we pray that he had supernatural comforting too. But Lord, I'm just crying out for justice.
Yeah.
Justice for that child. Justice for the parents. Bring it on, Lord. Bring justice. In the mighty name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you,
Amen.
Christine.
I hope I didn't step
No, I'll just you stay there, Christine. I'm going to finish off now. Jeanette, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
Thank you, John.
and you, Christine, you can get in on it. Right, we love you.
Thank you.
And this isn't going to stop there. God bless everyone, and please be in touch. We need you all.